once again. Leading off our discussion tonight is Democratic Congressman Jim Himes of Connecticut. He's a member of the House Intelligence Committee. Congressman Himes, what can you tell us about this meeting last week that's being reported in the Washington Post and the New York Times?
Yeah, Lawrence, I can't tell you anything about the meeting. As you know, I'm not at liberty to discuss classified information that is conveyed to the Congress. What I can tell you, and I can't emphasize enough how important it is that people understand this, it almost doesn't matter what happened in the meeting. If the reports are true that the president dressed down and fired the senior intelligence official in the United States, Admiral Maguire, because of something that Maguire's people may or may not have told the committee, the American people need to understand that there are a very small number of people, myself included, on the House and in the Senate, who oversee and provide oversight of the Intelligence Committee and might get told if there were election interference. And now the signal has been sent to the very highest levels of the intelligence community that just like the Justice Department, you are in the service not of the Constitution of the United States or in the national security of the United States. You are in the service of President Donald Trump. And if you don't understand that, look what just happened to Maguire. So, Lawrence, what needs to happen right now is that Maguire and anyone else who is in that room needs to come forward. And they can't do a Mattis, they can't do a John Kelly and feel some sense of loyalty to their former boss. These people need to come forward because what we're talking about is one of the cornerstones of our democratic republic.
What do you mean by come forward?
Well, if it is true that Maguire was dressed down by the president because his people made a presentation to the Intelligence Committee, Maguire needs to speak up right now and tell the world that that is what happened. Now, I suspect Maguire wasn't alone in the room when that happened. So, again, if it happened, the people who were there, can't hold their tongues because the compromise of the intelligence community to be compromised in the service of the political aims of President Trump, I mean, that isn't even democracy. We're talking about Noriega's Panama. We are talking about, Putin's Russia. We are talking about something that dictatorial regimes do. So, again, if the story is true, it is time for Mr. Maguire to come forward and say, here is what happened.
Who are you allowed to discuss that meeting with? Can you discuss it with members of the Senate Intelligence Committee? Can you discuss it with, obviously, other members of your own committee? But more importantly, could you, if you wanted to, just go discuss it with someone in the administration, for example, the President of the United States, as the Washington Post is reporting Devin Nunes did? Washington Post is reporting that Devin Nunes took the information from that meeting and went straight to the President of the United States. Is that legal?
That's a really good question. We all sign affidavits that say we will not disclose classified information to somebody who is not authorized to receive it. So, yes, I can discuss that with other people who are authorized to receive it. If Mr. Nunes wanted to make the case that he was authorized to talk to the President of the United States about it as a purely legal matter, maybe that's not a problem. But as a constitutional matter, and remember, the Constitution sets up the Congress to act as a check on the power of the president, it is a moment of constitutional crisis. And Lawrence, I don't know if you're reporting this, but other outlets are reporting that joining Ambassador Grinnell at the very top of the Intelligence Committee is a former, apparently, if the press reports are to be believed, is a former staffer of Devin Nunes, an individual by the name of Kash Patel, who has an interesting and rich history with respect to acting in defense of the president. He, too, apparently is moving to the very top of the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. So what we have here, and, we don't need to get into detail about Ambassador Grinnell. All we need to know is that he has precisely zero experience in intelligence. And he is now being joined by one of Devin Nunes' operatives in the highest position that exists in the United States intelligence community.
Also joining our discussion now is Ned Price. He's a former CIA analyst and the former senior director and spokesperson for the National Security Council in the Obama administration. He's an MSNBC national security contributor. Ned, how will the staff in the intelligence community react to this? They now have not only a president who is an intelligence risk, which is to say a risk when in possession of intelligence information. They have now a director of national intelligence. The very top of the intelligence pyramid is now a risky place to deliver information.
Well, you know, Lawrence, as a former intelligence professional, to me, there was one particularly disturbing element to this story. And frankly, it wasn't the crux of it. It wasn't the central allegation that the Russians are back in 2020, that Trump wants to keep that hidden, because in many ways, we've always known that would be the case. So that it was the most predictable element of the story. President Trump has in many ways left the door open for the Russians. Volume 1 and Volume 2 of the Mueller report documented how, as president, he tried to cover his tracks during his time in office, and we fully expect he'll try and do the same again as president. As a former intelligence professional, what was even more disturbing to me was buried in the New York Times story that there was the notion circulating among presumably some senior intelligence officials that perhaps this briefing shouldn't go forward at all, or if it did go forward, that it should be shaded a little bit, and perhaps it shouldn't be given in such stark terms so as not to engender President Trump's ire. That goes against everything that I learned, everything that I knew, everything that I practiced during my time at the CIA. It goes against the maxim of speaking truth to power, a maxim and a dictum that I know remains near and dear to the heart of so many of my former colleagues. But going back to the core allegation about the Russians, there's also a national security implication here. We know that the best antidote to Russian propaganda, to the Russian covert influence campaign that we can fully expect to unfold in the coming months is public attribution. That is to say, naming and shaming. And it needs to come from the intelligence community. We need a clear and unequivocal statement from our national security leaders, similar to what we had in 2016, about a month before the election, but even more prominent, even on a larger scale, to make clear to the American people what's going on and to make clear that this is a foreign actor. This is not organic to our political system. If there is this inclination on the part of the intelligence community, if Donald Trump's campaign of intimidation and delegitimization of our intelligence community is working and they feel weakened and anything but emboldened, I fear that we aren't going to have that, and I fear that the Russians will have much freer reign to go forward with this sort of campaign.
Congressman Himes, can your committee use oversight authority of the intelligence community to investigate exactly what is going on here?
Yes, we can. Of course we can. But as Ned points out, you know, at the end of the day, we are at the mercy of the intelligence community in terms of what we see. You know, we don't have the resources. We don't have inspectors who can just knock on the door at CIA or NSA and say, I need to see this. We are at the mercy of the intelligence community to come forward and say, you know, as the general counsel of the DNI did with respect to the whistleblower, when there was some question about whether we were ever going to get the whistleblower complaint on the Ukraine call. It was a senior employee of the DNI who came forward to the Congress. We rely on that happening, and that's why this is so scary. If, in fact, there are senior officials in the intelligence community who are debating whether Congress should see this or not because it may irritate the president. And by the way, this is not the first time we've heard this allegation, Lawrence. There has been buzz out there that the intelligence community has been unhappy with the prospect of doing an open hearing on international threats, something that we've done year in and year out because they are afraid of something that they might say may contradict a belief of the president. And so we are seeing the possibility here that at senior levels, as Ned Price points out, there may be at least consideration taken of what Congress gets to see. Now, the optimistic and good news here is that I know these professionals very, very well. And, you know, our intelligence community is comprised of patriots, of people who could be doing lots of other things where they would be making much more money and be a lot safer, but they care about their country. So I do think that in the end, people inside the intelligence community, if they sense that the community is being used as a political tool of the president, they will come forward. They will come forward as whistleblowers. They will come forward not as whistleblowers and tell that story. But this is just not a moment. That's not a stress that should be put on what is an organization that is essential to our national security.
Congressman Jim Himes, Ned Price, thank you both for your guidance on this important story tonight. Really appreciate it. And when we come back,